Hello and welcome to everyone joining us today for Q-Centrix webinar, The Power of Research Networks to Transform Healthcare. My name is Vantina Smith, Partnership Lead with Clinical Research here at Q-Centrix, and I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, let's just review a few housekeeping items. All participants have been muted to maintain the integrity of the webinar discussion. We ask that you submit all questions to the Q&A box within your participant controls on the bottom of the screen. We will answer all questions at the end of the webinar, but you can submit them at any time during the discussion. All registrants will receive a webinar recording via email, and at the end of the webinar, there will be a pop-up survey that we ask that you take some time to let us know how we're doing. A very exciting discussion planned for you today. And to kick things off, we first want to introduce our panelists, starting with Victor and then Kate.
Hey everyone, Victor Wang, Senior Vice President of Data and Research here at Q-Centrix. Really focused on building out our research offerings, both to hospitals as well as to life sciences partners. My background historically has been in clinical data sets and supporting drug development efforts. Thanks everyone for joining.
Hi, everyone. Kate Sharon. I'm Director of Clinical Research here at Q-Centrix. My background is clinical in nature. I'm a nurse practitioner by training and have worked in research in various capacities over the last 25 years. Here at Q-Centrix, I'm mainly responsible for growing our research network and helping our hospitals participate more fully in research. And just like Victor, very happy that you're all here today.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Kate. We are looking forward to have you as our panelists for today. To kick things off, we want to start with an overview of the research network. There are a lot of research networks in the market. Victor, how is a research network defined?
Yeah, it's certainly not a novel concept, right? But at its core, it's a bridge between research sponsors, so those who are paying for research programs, whether this is life sciences, medical device programs, or other research entities, and then where the research occurs, so hospitals or research-specific sites. So what this speaks to is that there are a lot of issues in sourcing enough sample size from a single hospital or even a group of hospitals. And so to some extent, this is kind of a supply and demand side equation around looking to match hospitals with the right opportunities. So a lot of networks do have similarities in this way, but not all are created equal. They do share a similarity in that they're an avenue to get more research dollars to hospitals. But that said, there's a difference in terms of their focus areas, whether that's the diseases that they focus on, the value proposition to hospitals and life sciences, and then the supporting technologies and services that are kind of bundled with all of that. Kate, from your vantage point, partnering closely with our hospital partners, what are your perspectives?
So very much agree. There's variation in what we would see as a research network or call a research network. Most of us might be familiar with NCI trials and the various cooperative groups in the oncology space. But as Victor pointed out, there's lots of other ways that you can grow your research enterprise through a network. Research networks can serve as a conduit to finding studies that best fit your patient population. They can serve as a way to build fit-for-purpose data sets and get more value from the data that your organization's already collecting, even adding additional revenue.
Taking into account the various types of research networks in the market, Kate, why did Q-Centrix create a research network?
As we've had conversations with our hospital partners, we've really noticed a few common themes. We hear that our hospital partners are having to say no to certain projects, whether it's because of not enough resources to do the data collection that's required, or resources to sit and review charts to find potentially eligible patients for those prospective interventional trials. We also hear in some cases that meeting research requirements for certification and accreditation can be a challenge, like for COC or NAPBC accreditation, for example. So we created the network as a way to support our hospitals. We don't want them saying no to those projects that are really a good fit for their patients. We want to help them say yes to those things that are great opportunities and grow their research enterprise. Victor, in the conversations you've had, what has come up that you've seen?
Yeah, I'll speak to kind of the life sciences or the sponsor side of the equation. I think the The pain points are to some extent the opposite side of the fence of what we hear from our hospital partners, right? In particular, sponsors are looking for ways in which they can gain transparency to how data was sourced, where it's coming from, the specific sites. Specifically also transparency around, how folks are accessing charts and pulling out information. And increasingly looking for ways in which they can truly help their partners on the ground that are running these research programs. And so the ability to deploy technology or people to help, whether that's for interventional studies or sort of data set building initiatives. And for the most part, we're seeing that this is resonating a lot to kind of the two sides. I think a big part of that is just because Q-Centrix sits at this interesting juncture, right? We support so many hospitals around the country already in their quality and sort of core registry programs. And so we launched this research network, as Kate said, at the end of 2023 and really got going in 2024. We have 11 health systems signed up so far. Many of those are on the call today. And this represents access at about 84 hospitals with a few dozen more on the way. So for a lot of these partners, they already trusted us with their data and for submitting to their various registries, whether this is federal, state, medical society run registries. And so increasingly, I think where our hospital partners are focused is, how do you turn these cost centers historically to sort of maintain accreditation or sort of maintain good standing with medical societies and turn them into revenue opportunities that can help support their research programs and really the patient populations that they care for. Kate, you're closer to kind of the day-to-day on the research network piece, and so I want you to kind of chime in and talk to folks about how it all works.
Sure. So we wanted the research network to be easy to join and easy to participate in. So it is a no cost to join added benefit to our hospital partners. We, once you're signed up, we work to understand your patient population, how your research entity currently operates, and where we can use that data that your organization is already collecting and leverage that for research. There's a significant overlap between the registry data that's already being collected and what would be required or of interest in a research setting. So we really have seen this already and are using the research network to demonstrate these efficiencies and help our partners. I think we have a poll question coming up for everybody. Valentina, you want to share that?
Yes, absolutely. And our host, Emily, will be sharing the poll results as they come in. The question is, which of the following do you consider your biggest challenge in research?
Okay, the poll is live. Everyone should be seeing the options on their screen, and we'd love to see your responses coming in. Just give it a minute and give everyone a chance to respond. Okay, responses are somewhat split so far, so we'll give just another minute. You should see it popped up on your screen. Okay. I'm going to end the poll. It looks like, we have answers or we have people who have selected every answer, but the leading response is identifying new patients for clinical trial enrollment.
Thank you, Emily. That is pretty consistent with what we hear from our partners on a day-to-day basis. And there's a lot of nuances and complexities around that. Kate, can you share some of your observations with this?
I absolutely will. So we hear this across the board from almost every one of our hospital partners. Part of this is that the clinical trial inclusion-exclusion criteria are becoming increasingly narrow. It's harder and harder to find patients to fit those criteria. That being said, most of our EMR systems are not made for easy filtering and searching for these patients. So we recently helped one of our network members, Kootenai Health in Idaho, with screening for a study they had going on. We took a list of patients with a particular diagnosis code and compared them against the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So what resulted was saving time for their coordinator. We gave them a filtered list of the potentially eligible patients that fit those criteria. And confidence for both the site that all potentially eligible patients for that trial had been reviewed, as well as for the sponsor. So when we're getting pestered to fill out those in screening and enrollment logs, we returned this completed set, listing when patients didn't meet criteria, where they fell out, so that could be used to complete those logs and again just give confidence to both the site and the sponsor that all patients had been reviewed. I think I would be interested to see, Victor, kind of what your thoughts are on screening and finding patients for trials.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of the same types of traction on the life sciences front, right? What's really unique about our approach is the breadth of access that we have, right? So many of our 1,000+ hospital partners today are interested in running clinical trials if they're not already running them. But they all kind of have the same types of challenges around actually looking for these patients. Historically, a lot of the solutions out there have been sort of software focused or AI focused. And what we hear from a lot of our partners is that there's just a tremendous amount of burden associated with using new tools or bringing in newfangled technologies. So our ability to just access patient chart data and go deep into the clinical record to help alleviate some of that burden and just basically narrow the list of patients that we actually have to look into to talk to the physicians or potentially outreach to the patient to. It's just a tremendous head start on top of all of the data that we're already helping the hospital gather. So in conditions in cardiovascular and oncology in particular, we already have done a lot of call it a first pass abstraction.
So what we're seeing here is an intersection between registry and research, an overlap of data. And so what we found, observed that there's 80% of an overlap between registry data and the data that's being used for clinical data research. Kate, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I think this is part of the efficiencies we were referring to earlier, is that most of the data that we're looking for, whether it's trying to do study feasibility or complete an investigator-initiated project, all of those things get a really good start by beginning with our registries. We have a couple of use cases. We've helped one partner who was asked to participate in a statewide cancer collaborative. They thought, oh, Q-Centrix does our cancer abstraction. They can help us complete this project. So we were able to pull the information from the registry and easily append the additional biomarker fields and get them, up and ready to participate in that project, which was looking at, diagnosis, time to treatment, and genetic markers for that particular condition. It was very efficient, saved them a ton of time, and is now helping them look at their patient population in a new way. Another use case, again, using registry data, we have a physician champion at one of our network members who had a project looking at surgical outcomes and didn't really realize that a lot of the same fields were part of the registry. So we're working on mapping the existing registry fields, really just helping them look at the outcomes for this group of patients. This project is going to be expanded to some other hospitals to increase sample size and the power of the results of that study. Additionally, it's helping some of their residents meet their research requirement for their residency. So again, just all of these different ways of leveraging this research data to improve and grow what we know about our patients and our research departments.
Yeah, and the overlap is such a great point. We don't intend to sort of suggest that this is a silver bullet for solving all of the challenges in research programs or creating data sets for research. But what it does give, and I think I used this word earlier, it gives us a really nice head start, right? And it can help us drive a lot of efficiencies, both on the hospital side, but also on the life sciences side that are looking for, research-ready data sets. It is very, very different to sort of start a project from scratch, screening in the patients, re-abstracting all information around demographics, around staging, around histology, versus being able to access a data set that has some amount of the needed data elements, where you can quickly save on patient screening costs, and you've done 60 to 80% of the abstraction that's needed already. And so the network can really help with this, right? By leaning into some of this pre-vetted and pre-abstracted information, and also sort of helping our sites secure research programs that work for them, right? So much of the challenge around this space is there are all these research needs out there, but it's really hard to know whether or not your facility is a good fit if you see the specific patient populations of interest. And so in this way, we can help with that feasibility cost, right? Driving to an efficient understanding of whether or not you should say yes or no to a study is, the first step in whether or not a study will be successful. In fact, we've kind of looked at in retrospective cases where studies that weren't successful at some of our hospital partners just never would have been successful, right? But a lot of that it's been hard to access this type of data to make those determinations. A big thing is also just labor shortages, right? We see this across our core business, and research departments aren't immune from that. Hiring and training clinical research coordinators or research assistants can be really challenging. And it's also hard to think through the economics when it's a kind of a fractionated FTE. And so by being able to provide expert staffing to support these programs too, it can be super, super helpful in just helping all stakeholders manage their costs and kind of drive to a more efficient outcome. And we have a slide pulled up here. These numbers vary widely, but in general, the numbers are really, really big, both in terms of the average number of delays against a scheduled timeline, as well as the sheer cost it takes to keep these research programs running, when they're kind of in this rescue mode or you can't find enough patients.
Victor, you've touched on this already, but research networks not only serve hospitals, but also life science companies. What barriers do clinical research sponsors face, and how do research networks help?
Yeah. And I think, what folks will understand, and we have both sort of hospital leaders as well as life sciences partners on, is it's both sides of the equation, right? So we've already talked about, how hard it is to find the right patient population and get to the right sites. One of the big things that I think is increasingly sort of coming to the forefront is this concept of data provenance. And so in layman's term, this is kind of the chain of custody of data. The FDA talks about this a lot as they increasingly look for sort of these real world data sources to help support regulatory filings and other decisions about drugs and medical devices. And the concept here is that, increasingly, there are a lot of data sets where it's not clear where they're coming from and how the data elements are getting created. This could be, black box AI approaches or large language models or imputation models used to kind of predict what's happening in that patient chart. The big problem here is so much of this information exists in unstructured detail, whether this is the physician notes or third-party pathology reports, an upside down fax of a scan that came in at some point. All of this detail matters a lot for finding the right patient populations and being able to create the data sets needed from this data. And so this approach has really been resonating for life sciences sponsors. We've been, for our research networks on the phone here, have been getting requests for everything from Alzheimer's disease to lupus to heart failure, where we already do a lot of work, to different types of cancers across solid tumors as well as hematological malignancies. And also these needs span the gamut, right? It's interventional clinical trials, it's retrospective chart review studies, it's observational studies with kind of a mix of both that involve chart review as well as consenting in patients. So the feedback's just been super consistent, right? People are looking to run more clinical trials, and they want to have higher confidence that they can go to a few key sites without, this spaghetti on the wall approach. Let's ask 200 sites and see if they'll be able to deliver. I think in a similar vein, right, Valentina, you've managed a lot of our relationships with our non-hospital, non-sponsor partners, but folks who have access to clinical data. What are you seeing on that front?
Yes, we've learned from our life science partners that just having access to clinical data often is not enough. Having the ability to mine unstructured information is a critical component. This has resulted in our life science partners experiencing challenges in sourcing high quality clinical data sets with the transparent chain of custody that you referenced earlier. However, to effectively manage this process, it requires having a team with the clinical expertise to perform this type of work, having advanced technology solutions to store and process the data, which also supports conducting quality control reviews to ensure the accuracy and the completeness of the data set. Thus far, we have discussed the importance of the research network for hospitals and life science companies. Now let's shift and spend some time talking about the importance of the research network for patients. Kate, can you kick off this part of our discussion?
Absolutely. I mean, patients is why we all do this, right? We want better therapies, better access to therapies for everyone. Sometimes we see that studies keep going to the same sites or the certain geographic areas, and we're missing out on certain populations. So a research network can really help a site gain access to studies that they might not otherwise have had access to, whether it's because they really do have that patient fit for that particular study, or they might not have the resources to do the business development to recruit the studies to their site. So just bringing those opportunities to all patients in all places is really one of the biggest benefits of a research network. We want all patients to be represented in trials and really have that diversity amongst our information that we're really looking for. Valentina, I know that you've worked a lot on helping our sponsors and helping this whole team look for those diverse patient populations. Speak a little bit to that for us.
Yes. And so, with that, there's a couple of layers to that. For one thing is just having that appropriate outreach, for to patients so that you have people that coming in the door with a diverse background, medical background, ethnicity, age, so that the data set can be more enriched. Also, having the opportunity to, with your recruitment and composition of your staff, that can help address some of the needs one-on-one, allow some comfortability for our patients, and all of that gives us the opportunity to have a little bit more enriched data sets along the way.
I think we have another poll for everyone.
Yes, and once again, our host, Emily, will be sharing the results as they come in. The question is, which strategy do you think will be most effective in increasing diversity in clinical research?
Thanks, Valentina. Everyone should see the poll on their screen now.
It'll be exciting. I bet we're going to get answers kind of across the board because every place has such a different population.
Answers are coming in. Just give it just another minute. So far, Kate, you're kind of on the nose with that prediction. We'll give it just one more second. Thanks, everyone, for your responses. Okay. I'll be ending the poll. Thank you all for your input. It looks like you're correct, Kate, that we did have answers across the board. Certainly, the leading response is collaborative partnerships with research networks or clinical data partners, but that is closely followed by community outreach and education programs and offering financial incentives for participation. So yes, clearly, some of these strategies are resonating with all of our participants.
Thank you, Emily. Kate, Victor, any other comments to all of those things being across the board for many of our audience participants?
Yeah, it's such a challenging topic, and it's a very, very high need. Increasingly, right, these sample sizes for a lot of these studies are smaller and smaller because they're focused on sort of rarer and rarer patient populations. And I think that creates a tremendous amount of risk that, drugs and procedures and medical devices are approved without a real representative view of the population. But one of our perspectives has really been, if you want to sort of have more diverse patient populations, you really just have to sort of be able to go to hospitals that are treating a more diverse, population. Historically, it's just been super challenging, right? Because there's this, a tendency for research to stay in academic institutes in major cities. But we're really hopeful that our approach of partnering with, we had the logos up there earlier, a really diverse range of hospitals of different sizes and different geographical areas can really kind of move the needle on these initiatives.
I think I'm excited that one of the leading answers was those collaborative partnerships with research networks. It shows that what we're hearing and what we're doing is resonating with our network members, our hospital partners to be future members. And it really is just a great strategy for bringing research to new patients and new areas.
Overall, we've seen many advancements that have improved health equity over the years. However, there is still a critical need for diversity in clinical research. If we think in terms of our patient experience, particularly in underserved or minority communities, they've reported experiencing barriers such as gaining access to or transportation to research sites, logistical or financial challenges accompanied by attending multiple visits or taking time off work, language barriers that non-English speaking patients may encounter. And then concerning our community hospitals, they're often faced with an insufficient research structure for adequate staffing levels and resources and data management systems, or not having a dedicated focus or financial resources like the larger academic medical centers that we referenced earlier. And ultimately, this just results in low patient volumes. So in terms of strategies for hospitals to advance health equity, it includes partnering with a research network like what we've been discussing to expand the support and opportunities to participate in research suited to patient populations, and also having a clinical data management partner to assist with the curation of that data and alleviate some of the burden and staffing concerns that our hospitals may face. And then engaging community groups, such as the faith-based community or nonprofit groups, to effectively reach diverse communities, all while keeping patients as the focal point for these efforts. So this has been a great, discussion on diversity, great discussion on the advantages for the research network for life sciences partners and for hospitals. And we've covered a lot of great information today. So to summarize some of the key things we have talked about, if you had to name 1 to 2 things you want partners to take away, Kate and Victor, what would they be?
I would say research networks are just a great way for our hospital partners to overcome some of those challenges they're facing. Might be different across different hospitals in different areas, but it's definitely something to consider to be able to augment your resources and bring more research to your area.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I think, research networks are this really kind of new platform that can allow sponsors to move away from, traditional data aggregators and folks who have services that don't necessarily enable true access to patient information and the hospital relationship, right? Because, a lot of these approaches don't really sort of solve the problems that hospitals and sites are reflecting on the ground. And so these types of platforms, I think, can be a next generation in terms of advancing the power of this type of data capture.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Victor. Now we're going to move into our Q&A segment. We've seen some great questions come in throughout the webinar. First, we want to start with answering some questions that we received as part of our registration. So thank you for submitting those earlier. Victor, this first question goes to you. What research fields specifically are helping with patient outcomes?
Yeah, a lot of the focus area today in real world data is focused on understanding what's really happening outside of, these very highly regulated study environments, right? The real world setting of care across multiple different providers. So a lot of the research needs that this solves for is understanding patient journeys. It's doing comparative effectiveness analyses, right? Some of this is just, a pure head-to-head in a similar patient population of your average patient that is taking these different types of drugs. What are the outcomes like? What are the adverse events? Do people have significant sort of disease-modifying impacts in terms of their quality of life? And then built on top of that, increasingly, folks are able to kind of pull in billing and financial information, right? Understanding, hey, between all of these different drugs, what's working the best? Between ones that are working similarly, what is the most effective from an economic standpoint? In terms of total cost of care for the patient, for the hospital and delivering specific drugs, and for the sort of healthcare ecosystem as a whole.
Thank you, Victor. Kate, this next one's for you. Are the clinical trials limited to just industry-sponsored trials?
So when we think about industry sponsored, I'm thinking prospective interventional studies, new drugs, new devices. And no, our research that we're helping our partners with is not just limited to that. I will say there are other interested groups. There are collaborative organizations that are looking for data to, again, increase the power of their results. There are patient advocacy groups that are really looking to better understand how patients are really doing in the community, whether they've been on a clinical trial previously or just on a therapy that might be newer to the market, and being able to share that information with patients who are newly diagnosed or have a family member, their caregiver for someone who's been newly diagnosed. We talked earlier about some of those physician-initiated studies looking at patient outcomes for their patient population, for their specialty in a given situation or certain comorbidities, anything like that. So no, not just limited to those industry-sponsored things. Lots of different ways to participate in research through the research network.
Kate, Victor, can you talk about clinical trial opportunities that would be generated by Q-Centrix and how that compares to other companies in the industry?
Yeah, I think specifically, we open up a couple of additional opportunities because of the services that we offer. We hear from a lot of our hospital partners in the research network and then otherwise, as well as from sort of our assessments that we run with hospital programs, that a lot of them aren't taking on observational studies or chart review studies, right? Because this is just a lot of labor around research assistance, abstracting information. That said, I think because Q-Centrix has the ability to sort of offer staff augmentation to complete this work, to find those patients too, we can bring you many more of those types of opportunities where our hospital partners don't necessarily need to commit their own people and talent to complete those types of projects. And so it almost opens up a whole new set of doors as it relates to the needs that are out there. So these, you don't have to have an active ingredient. You don't have to have a clinical research coordinator finding a patient, in real time and filling out a case report form or anything like that. Instead, we can leverage the access that we already have at your system to review those charts and pull out that information. And generally, from a sponsor standpoint too, Q-Centrix is super attractive for that because we can have one consistently trained workforce doing that type of data collection across multiple of our hospital partners. And then in addition to that, I think on the interventional side and the other types of trials that are being sort of pushed through different types of vendors and research networks, in general, this is not a mutually exclusive approach. Our hospital partners have trials that they're sourcing directly from sponsors. Some of our partners are part of multiple research networks. Like we had mentioned, everyone has kind of a slightly different flavor there. I think what we bring to bear is, the access that we already have to your existing data, right? We don't bring, opportunities that might, be a challenge to source those patients. We're able to look at your historical data to really understand whether or not it's feasible to make that commitment to do that study startup effort.
Thanks, Victor. We will now take some questions from our Q&A box. We've seen some great things coming in. Victor, if we can go back to you just for a moment, can my hospital still be part of the research network if we're not a current Q-Centrix partner?
Yeah, at this stage, we're not being too sort of closed off with who we're able to bring in. That being said, as part of the research network, we want to get some access to that data, right? So that we're not just emailing you every day, asking about how many patients you have of a specific variety. So in short, it's a bit of an all-comers approach. We're happy to engage with you if you're not currently a customer or a partner of ours on the quality front. That said, I think what's been really nice about a lot of these conversations is to the sort of overlap in the Venn diagram we had shared earlier. We believe that the silos that exist within hospitals, from the research department to the quality department, should be broken down. The focus area, the data that's needed, is often very, very similar. And so we have had customers reach out who have an interest in the research network, but what that leads to is a broader enterprise discussion with their quality leaders as well as their research leaders, with sort of ultimately C-suite sign-off around this being a worthwhile partnership to pursue because of the value in both arenas.
Thank you, Victor. For our next question, Kate, you've shared some great examples about our partners and their varying levels of participation. Our next question is, what if we can only participate in the Q-Centrix Research Network to a small degree right now, but would like to be more involved in the future?
I think that's probably not an uncommon way things have kind of played out for a lot of our research network members. They may have a particular area of focus or a particular certain patient population. And so a study comes around and it's something they really want to participate in, their patients fit. And then maybe there's a little bit of, an ebb where the studies are not necessarily represented in their patient population. So it's not unusual for that to happen. I think also, in some cases, Victor's talking about understanding this historical data. There's some help. We need to get things up and running and get started. So initially, gathering that information and understanding your patient population is going to take us a little bit of time. And so it gives the new member time to kind of get used to our system, the way we present studies, and the things we have to offer. So that's not unusual, not a problem, and we'll work at whatever pace the member wants to work at.
Expand on that a little further, and it leads right into our next question here, Kate. How does the registry team, if they don't work directly with the research coordinators, how can they engage with them on the data overlap?
Yeah, I think part of the kind of getting hospitals to become members of the research network, that's the start of it, kind of introducing the research departments to their quality departments doing the registry, if they don't already know each other, or maybe they're just not aware of what data is there. Sometimes certain institutions have processes in place for viewing and requesting data or running reports that make it harder for certain departments to share that information. So one of the things I like to do is make sure that we're kind of introducing everybody. And sometimes, they might work at the same hospital or same system, but they haven't met each other before. And so just forming those relationships helps break down some of those barriers. And then I think also that we work with quality departments and research departments. We have this broader view of the hospital and its data. So even if one of the research members is coming to us and saying, well, we have this study and we want to run feasibility, we can really help them better understand using their registry data if that trial is a really good fit for them or not. So not uncommon that these two departments might not know each other or know what the other is doing or have access to the data, but definitely we can work through those processes and help everybody kind of make that process more seamless.
Thank you. That is great insight on how to navigate through that process internally. We've had one last question that came in. Kate, what were the key outcomes and benefits observed by the Kootenai Health after implementing the expedited patient screening process?
Well, I wish I had somebody from Kootenai here to tell the story for themselves. I really think it was a huge time saver and a lot of relief for their team there, that the work was getting done. It was being done by a trusted partner. they were able to take that list and look more closely. So we reviewed the patients against the inclusion and exclusion that are easy to determine by looking at a chart, which is most of the inclusion and exclusion, but not all. Some things say, in the opinion of the investigator, or need a recent lab, or things like that. But really looking at the information we provided back to them, then their coordinator was able to meet with their physicians involved in that particular therapeutic area, and really just decide which of those patients was really going to be a good fit for that trial. I think boosted their enrollment, more dollars to their organization, and just really showing that sponsor that they've got things in place to really help meet their goals that they set when they opened the trial, and then hopefully bringing future trials to them with that same sponsor.
Thank you, Kate. Those are all the questions that we have in our Q&A box. So this concludes our segment for questions and answers. If you think of any questions after today, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to connect with you at another time. So we want to thank all of you for joining today. If you are interested in joining our research network, contact your partner success advisor or email info@qcentrix.com for more information. So we've had a very robust discussion on the power of research networks to transform healthcare. We want to thank our audience and our panelists, Kate and Victor, for your participation today. We ask that you complete our quick survey. It will pop up at the end of the webinar. Tell us what you like and what you'd like to see in our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.